Hey, all you Arizona lovers. This is the Finding Arizona podcast. I'm your host, Jose.
And I'm your producer, Brittany.
And here at Finding Arizona Podcast, we collect the local stories of all entrepreneurs and from around the valley. So join us at findingarizonapodcast.com, where you can hear every episode and see it as well at
YouTube. Like, subscribe, and comment below who you want to see next on our show. And when you're ready to start your podcast, you found the right spot. Found House, your next podcast production company.
Now, let's get back to the show. Score big with SeatGeek. Whether it's concerts, sports, or live events, SeatGeek has you covered. Use code FindingArizona to get a fantastic $20 discount on your SeatGeek tickets. Catch your favorite live events hassle-free with extra savings. Visit SeatGeek.com and make every experience unforgettable. Welcome back, everybody, to the Finding Arizona podcast. I'm your host, Jose, and as always, we bring in fantastic guests every week. I'd love to introduce Thomas here, and we're going to be talking a little bit about finances, but I would love to let Thomas introduce the business. I don't want to mess up the name because I was already having some verbal, I don't know how to say it, but I want to make sure that it comes straight from the horse's mouth, as they say.
Perfect. I appreciate it. We pronounce Lukrom.
Lukrom.
And It's actually just a little play phonetically on the Latin root word for lucrative.
Yes.
So Lukrom, Lucrum. It basically means profit, gain, advantage, abundance, wealth. So yeah, awesome. That was the genesis of the name. My wife actually came up with it.
That's awesome. That's really great. And so off air, we were talking about this kind of stuff of finances and family. But I'm going to ask you the question that we typically start off with, which is, give us a little bit of your origin story. We did talk a little bit off air about it, but I'd love to get it down and written into the word, into the book of how finance and financial life came into your world and you made a business out of it.
Absolutely. So I grew up in a middle-class family in the U.S. We had just enough food and shelter and other kind of necessities of life, but we didn't have that little bit extra. So frequently it was, hey, mom, dad, I want blank. I want to go on this vacation, or I want to play these sports, or I want that new toy. And the response was often, we don't have the money, right? Yep. That was almost always the response. And I think a lot of people can identify with that.
Yeah.
And so very quickly from a young age, I identified hey, this money thing is an obstacle. Mm-hmm. And if I can get on the other side of that, then it sounds like I'll have a lot of freedom to do what I want. And,
yes.
and I'm a bit, you might say willful. I think others might say stubborn, but I realized from a young age, I need to figure this thing out. So I was reading, the Kiyosaki Think and Grow Rich type books, Napoleon Hill, all of these different books to try and educate myself from a very young age. I mean, 10, 11, 12, I started reading these books.
Yeah.
And so, I had a desire to be financially independent from an early age.
Good.
And then, September 11th happened. I was a senior in high school. So I joined the military. I was in the Navy for 5 years.
Yeah.
I went, I served, I did what I thought was my part. Being overseas, my views changed a little bit on the U.S.'s role kind of in the world and globally.
Yeah.
But then after I got out, I decided to jump back into the financial world and pursue becoming financially independent. And I originally started investing in stocks and bonds while I was still in the military. And I made a ton of money. And then I lost even more money, right?
Yeah, that happens.
I was actually negative. I owed my broker money and I'd borrowed some money from some banks.
Yeah.
And so I had just gotten out of the military. I had borrowed all this money, lost it all. I just bought my first ever piece of real estate and I was kind of lost. And I said, I'm going to do something where I can have more influence on the outcome. Mm-hmm. I'm going to get into real estate instead of just blindly sending my money to Wall Street and hoping that those guys have my best interests at heart. And so I decided to move to Phoenix and get started learning real estate. I started off as a commercial real estate broker, learning multifamily apartment buildings, how to buy and sell those and underwrite those. And then from there, I just really stayed the course, learning as much as I could about real estate, about personal finance, and I tried to read a ton, find mentors, and really level up my knowledge because I didn't have that growing up.
Yeah.
I have a philosophy which is find people that have what you want, do what they do, you will get what they've got.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so many things that the reason why I ask these kind of questions early on is to get to the root of what's the pursuit. Like you understand what started it all, and it'll kind of progress you forward and help the person listening or the person watching understand that there is kind of this backstory and where it kind of defines you as the individual. And so I find that so fascinating, that your life changed on that very pivotal day of September 11th. I was in middle school when that happened. And so that was something that as a early kind of like still developing individual, that it was very significant because it wasn't an ordinary day. I actually was living on the East Coast when that happened in Pennsylvania. Wow. So
very close.
Yeah, very close. One in between what was happening over in DC and then in New York. And then also, I don't know if you've ever heard about this, the flight that went down in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, Flight 93,
I think so. And it landed in this wooded area. And so that was to the west of me.
Wow.
And so it was just kind of a crazy moment in life to be like this 7th grader and kids were being taken out of school. My dad picked me up from what a normal day, like I ended my normal day and I, was still kind of like worried because kids were being taken out of school. And my dad was like, I'm coming to get you, or he didn't tell me that, but he's like, he showed up and I was like, what are you doing here? Like, and he was parked outside the school and he's like, come with me, we're going to go. And so he took me back home and it was just, again, really unusual of a time to like be in that kind of hecticness. And so for you, I wanted to kind of ask you of like, in your world, I imagine it was like, I want to make a difference. I want to help people. I want to do this thing and join the military. And so is that the correct kind of ideals or?
A little bit, both of my grandparents, my grandfathers were in the military. One grandfather was in World War II.
Oh, wow.
He was on a B-24 bomber crew.
Nice.
My other grandfather was in the Korean and Vietnam War. And so I felt the sense of duty, certainly.
Yeah.
But then also I think I realized that school and pursuing college might not have been the right fit for me.
Sure.
And I think that's becoming more and more true.
More prevalent.
Today, more prevalent, certainly. It used to be a great path to knowledge, but now we've got phones that have all the knowledge that we need in the world. It's more critical thinking skills that we need.
Yeah.
So I needed a bit more structure. After I graduated high school, I just found myself kind of aimless and wandering. And I still had this nagging desire to go serve. I wanted to be part of something bigger. And, of course, I grew up in the era of, Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone and these kind of
movies,
cultural movies where, it was very impressionable to a young man at that point in time. And so, I wanted to go do what I thought was really cool stuff. So
that's, I get it. I mean, my grandfather was in the Korean War, and both my parents served, and that's how they met each other in basic training. And so that was definitely, it's been prevalent, not only in my life, my wife's life. Her father is actually a retired Navy veteran.
Oh, great.
And so he still lives out in San Diego, and he was like in charge of maintenance and kind of all of the base camp and all of that stuff. So when I first met him, I think he was retired, right? When I first met him? Yeah. So he had just retired, but he still knew all the places, all of the bases, like what things needed to be done. And he was showing me around and I was like, oh, wow, this guy really knows, because he knows what ships are parked in deck. And so it was really fun to kind of, experience something that I've never been a part of through the eyes and lens of someone who is very experienced and very knowledgeable. But 2, it's just like a way to connect with someone who's spent his entire life in it, like spent his whole, childhood into adulthood in this kind of realm of structure, like you put it, and to just kind of take away someone's passion from that level of like precision, preciseness, and kind of just every day, what I don't live. But so yeah, the military can be persuasive, but I'd love to also kind of get this understanding of like, you sought out knowledge through different entities of like books, mentors and things like that. When did you first feel, or what was that conversation like when you were like, oh, I now have the opportunity to build a business out of this? And what was that like for you?
Great question. So I was a broker, broker assistant, kind of broker, junior broker, working in the commercial real estate world. And I'd had a lot of success right out of the gate. And this was 2009, 10. The real estate market was very distressed at the time.
Yeah. Coming off of 2008,
right,
which is just like the pinnacle of like the downfall of the economy.
Exactly. And, the irony there was it was actually a great time to be a buyer of assets, right? Because everything was on sale.
Yeah.
And so after a couple of years of learning the business and learning the ropes from some amazing mentors, one local broker here in town, a guy named Neil, I felt that it was time for me. I was going to work, showing up every day in the suit in a very corporate kind of role in corporate life. And I liked being outside more. I liked interacting with clients, and I liked more of an informal life.
Yeah.
And what happened was I actually had a client who kind of stiffed me on a commission.
Okay.
And I decided, hey, a couple of things are true right now. The client says, well, when you have the gold, you make the rules, right?
Yeah.
And I said, well, two things are true right now. Number one, you're fired as a client. And number two, I'm going to go to the principal side of the transaction, meaning, being the one that's actually doing the deals and finding the deals and doing the deals.
Yeah.
So at that point in time, I was still in my 20s. Mm-hmm. I had amassed a little bit of personal net worth, but more importantly than that, I'd amassed some connections in the industry.
Yeah.
And I was able to put together a few little investment groups of people and go out and start buying properties. I was buying a lot of loans at the time from banks, distressed loans from banks. And that was a great time to be a very aggressive buyer of real estate and other assets.
I love that. I mean, again, to be able to say, hey, look, I have an opportunity here to step outside what I didn't feel comfortable being, just in the sense of like not being in charge or in control, so to speak. It's now my turn to take advantage of my network and what I've built from the last couple of years. And one of the things that you brought up was leaving kind of the area that you were to come to Phoenix. Mm-hmm. Was that 2008?
Exactly.
Was that part of the reason why Phoenix looked like a good place to start from?
You nailed it right on the head.
Okay.
So, I explained I lost a ton of money in Wall Street.
Yeah.
And so at the time, I was trying to go to school, junior college. It was okay. It wasn't a great fit. I was using my GI Bill benefits, and I decided I'd take the summer off. Mm-hmm. So I drove my truck up to Alaska. Unfortunately, I'd had my wallet stolen and all of my money at the time, and I had only enough line of credit on my credit card to pay for gas to get back home.
Okay.
So I actually went hitchhiking around Alaska that summer. It was incredible.
Nice.
It was a ton of fun. But I decided I was going to get into real estate.
Okay.
And being a bit of a contrarian, it made childhood very difficult, but it's made being an entrepreneur very easy. I just look at what everyone else is doing and do the opposite.
Yeah.
And so I decided the 5 worst real estate markets at the time were Florida, Detroit, Las Vegas, Phoenix, and inland California.
Okay.
And, Florida, I'm just not a hurricane humidity guy. It wasn't a good fit for me.
Yeah.
Detroit, the city was actively burning and going through arguably the biggest recession as a city.
Yeah.
Detroit will be an amazing American city in 20 or 30 years when it gets rebuilt, but I don't have that kind of timeline. I want to get this done now.
Yeah.
Las Vegas, I ruled out because I just don't know if they have the self-control to go to and live in
I love
Vegas.
That was one of the reasons.
Yeah, that was the reason. That was the reason. And then inland California, listen, I was stationed in Southern California. I was stationed in Coronado and in Camp Pendleton. Yeah. I'm not going to live in inland California. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
And
once
so
you've experienced
yeah, exactly. Why? If you can live on the coast, So I thought, well, Phoenix, I'll give that a go. I've never been to the desert, and I moved here and just absolutely fell in love with it. And I've been here since 2009. So that was kind of the genesis of why Phoenix. I was living in the Midwest at the time, and part of that catalyst was I'd stayed over that night at a good friend of mine. Mm-hmm. And getting up the next morning, there was water and ice and rain that had kind of covered my car.
Okay.
Right? And, I now can't get into my car. The ice scraper's in the car, but it's covered with an inch of ice. Right? I can't even get my key in. So, I'm banging and I'm doing all this stuff, and I get a little credit card, and I'm using my credit card to try and scrape the ice off of the car. Yeah. And I just remember having this idea, having lived in Southern California, like, I'm getting out of cold. Mm-hmm. I'm not built for cold. I'm built for heat. Yeah. And I just remember distinctly deciding I am moving somewhere where it does not freeze.
Freeze over.
Yeah. Exactly. So
good choice. Yeah. I mean, it's like, I think one of the things that I saw on your social media is like the idea of using the macroeconomics to buy time a little bit and understanding timing and things like that. And so one of the things that I think you got lucky on is just like that, Phoenix has now become a very prevalent piece of city and economics in the United States as far as growth. And
absolutely.
And so that's definitely, you came at a very particular time and you've watched it grow and develop, and now I would like to say that we're at a pivotal moment of like, really standing apart from the other cities around the United States and being a very pivotal point, A, close to the border, B, the fact that we are now the fifth largest city in the United States as growth in population. Mm-hmm. But also it's like now introducing new economics as far as I think a lot of the technology and systems technologies environment has understood that where we stand as far as the weather is prime real estate for where to go as far as like investing and installing new points of like brick and mortar buildings and investing in that area.
Absolutely. I did get a little bit lucky in choosing Phoenix, right? That was a little bit of dumb luck, but I'll take it.
Yeah.
I'll absolutely take
not,
it.
Right?
I had nothing to do with that, but I did get lucky. Here's a logic pattern that I have. And after living here for 15 years, look, we have no natural disasters, meaningful natural disasters to speak of.
Yes.
Right? Yes, it does get a little bit hot here, but in that obstacle, in that hardship is the opportunity, right?
Yeah.
So Phoenix is a test bed for innovation. ASU is an amazing school with an amazing innovation lab, and we're figuring out heat. As the planet gets hotter, we are going to be one of the places that we figure it out first. And then we're going to be able to export that knowledge elsewhere. But again, here's this logic pattern that I have. TSMC, the world's largest chip manufacturer in the world, right? They're building a $50 billion plant that at least has been announced. I'm sure that there will be more, right? We could probably add it up to $100 billion in the very near future. What do you think they spent on research and design of deciding where to go on the planet? $100,000, $1 million, probably tens of millions of dollars, right? Probably tens of millions. And they looked at literally everywhere in the entire world, and they chose Phoenix, probably for a variety of reasons, right? Stable political environment, very business friendly, no natural disasters, stable electric grid, and so on. But the point there is, I don't have to spend any money on research. Deciding that Phoenix is a great place to be and will be a great place to be. I can just look at the world's largest semiconductor manufacturer and say, well, they think Phoenix is a pretty good place to invest $100 billion. I'm probably going to be just fine, and I think it's a great place to invest my money.
Exactly. And so as we've kind of now pivoted into this, now where you're at currently, I love getting into the weeds of finding out a little bit things of like what I don't know, things that will help our listeners kind of relate to you on a very grandiose scale of like, give us a little bit about after starting the business, some of the first hiccups that you ran into or some of the first kind of downfalls that you had to overcome, because I think that really shows the perseverance of who you are.
You will encounter hiccups at every stage, and I still today encounter hiccups. They just have a few more zeros, or they involve a few more people, than I did starting out. And so the first thing is the hiccup that you have to face growing up in a family where we didn't have a strong financial base of knowledge was really understanding that money is just an idea, right? And I remember a scene in the movie The Matrix where this little kid is kind of telling the main character, like, you are the spoon in essence. Like it's you that needs to bend, right? And so I say, explain money to a child. You can't, right? It's just an idea. Explain it to a dog, right?
It took me a while to get to that point where it's like this world that we agree upon, where this piece of paper, this rectangle, is something that we all say is worth something.
Exactly. It's this social contract. And as soon as you understand it's just an idea, money is just an idea. It's a representation of energy, perhaps, or of resources. Well, suddenly, now it's not this fixed thing. It's an idea. It's much more malleable, right? You can move and twist and it's flexible. And so as soon as I kind of got to that realization, that unlocked a lot of doors for me mentally. And then I moved to the how. So once I really understood that money was this thing that could be controlled in a much different way, then I started moving to the tactical decisions. And of course, naturally, at least I make mistakes by doing, right? But that's also where I learn the fastest.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people want to get into, well, what do I do? What should I do next? How do I get started? I'm like, activity begets activity. Just start doing something, right? And you will very quickly either realize you're going in the wrong direction, or you will very quickly realize you're going in the right direction. Those feedback loops are usually pretty tight.
Okay.
Right? It's not this long feedback loop that happens over generations. It's kind of very quick feedback loop, right? So regardless of my problems, I would say activity is the single greatest way to effectuate change within your life. One of my other little mantras is, I call it forced evolution, right? And so I put myself in situations that I don't know how to get out of, right? And this happens all the time to us without thinking about it. But if you go to a new city and you don't know your way around, right? You have to figure that out, right? You're now in a place of learning. You have to learn where to go to get to where you want to be.
Absolutely.
And if you approach it the very same way, you put yourself in a new environment, surround yourself with new ideas and new people, you will, with their help and with their guidance and with your own, inquiry and being devoted to that discipline of learning, get to where you want to go. And the last little piece of that is, history favors the bold.
Yes.
Nothing ventured, nothing gained. You have to be willing to put yourself out there, because if you don't, I promise you will not get it. Whatever it is that you want, I promise you won't get it. But if you try, at least you might.
Yeah. I 100% agree. Just from the facet of like I've had this saying, it's like every little bit counts. Whether it's, your goal to want to lose weight or get healthier, or you want to build a business, or I've always learned or felt that every little thing that you do differently than what you did the day before will help you gain steps to go push yourself forward. And I think that says a lot about who you are, and just the fact that you've, again, pushed yourself into these different scenarios of life where it's like, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but here I am, and I'm going to do everything that I can to win. And so that's great. I feel like those types of things are what people need to hear.
And frequently, doing something hard is like any other muscle in the body. The more you do it, the easier it gets. Like I have a young man on my team, sharp young guy. He's dedicated. He's motivated. He wants to get out there and learn. And I took him up for a hike in Sedona, and I took him to the top of a mountain. And then I jumped off the mountain with a parachute, right? So I'm a base jumper. I jumped off the mountain.
Wow.
It blew his mind, right? It absolutely blew his mind. And then, I asked him, hey, what's scary for you, right? What is something that you could do? He goes, oh man, introducing myself to new people. That is scary for me. I go, great. I want you to do it 10 times today. And the first 2 or 3 or 4, your heart rate is going to be going. It is going to be difficult, and you will be scared. And by the 4th or 5th, you'll kind of calm down a little bit. And by the 7th or 8th, you'll be like, this is old hat. I got this, right? No problem, no sweat at all. And that is one of the most important lessons and takeaways that I at least get from life is, if you do something hard that challenges you every day, suddenly all of the other hard things in life seem more achievable. And so he did. He went out and introduced himself to 10 new people that day, and he texted me at number 7, like, hey, I've already introduced myself to 7. I'm crushing it. This is getting way easier. And, here I was, so happy, so proud for him, and, supporting him awesome. In that endeavor. It's a practice. And like you said, every little thing, every little decision either moves you closer to your goals or moves you away. I remember there was a story about a rowing club. I can't remember if it was Harvard or Boston or one of the universities back east. And it was, a mediocre team that basically, rose and competed for a national championship. And every single day they had to make a decision. Does this make the boat go faster or not? And if the answer is or not, it goes.
It's out the door.
That's simple. It's kind of binary in that way.
I love that. So being that is some of the foundational things to your business, I'd love to ask, can you give us a little bit of how this all works for Lukrom? I was reading up on the website, and just you brought in the base investors at a certain price point and some of the things that go into that. I'd love to just kind of get that out on the table and just kind of help us understand how this business works as a service and how it works overall.
Absolutely. So, growing up, traditionally, all I ever heard was, stocks and bonds, right? That was it. I mean, we heard a little bit about real estate, but stocks and bonds. There is a whole universe, a whole ecosystem of investments that are known as alternative investments. That is basically everything that is not a stock or bond. Right? And so there are tons of opportunities available in this alternative investment space, and that includes real estate. That includes lending. That includes private equity, venture capital, cryptocurrency, art, cars,
artificial intelligence.
So many things are in this space. And so one of the things that my company does is we do what's known as private lending. Right? And what happened in the Great Recession, shortly thereafter, they introduced some legislation, the Dodd-Frank Act. And that basically handcuffed the banks and gave them a very tight buy box to operate in. Right? Probably well-intentioned at the time, but what it's actually done is it's handicapped banks in their ability to provide credit, to provide financing out there in the world of real estate. And so,
is that the scene in The Big Short about the AAA?
Very similar, right? So what they were doing in that scene is they were basically taking mortgages, packaging them, and they were saying, hey, from our statistical analysis, not all of these loans will go bad. Only a certain number of these loans go bad. So even though you've filled this mortgage-backed security with effectively garbage, we are going to say our statistical model will say that only a certain percentage of those will go bad. When in fact, all of them went bad, right? Effectively. So, that's what happened. But in the private lending space, we are providing financing to other real estate investors in a way that banks aren't able to do it. So, banks typically take 30 to 60 days to close. They need inspections and appraisals, and they need your tax statements and your W-2 and probably some blood and maybe even your arm, I don't know, your firstborn. It's outrageous, right? And we don't need any of that stuff, right? We do charge a little bit more, but you're paying a premium for speed and efficiency. And so if you're out there in the real estate investment space and you found a great deal and you need to close by the end of the week, a bank can't accommodate that, right? But we can. And you might have the opportunity to make $50,000 on this deal, or maybe even $1 million, depending on the size. Are you willing to pay a little bit more in interest rate to make $50,000? Well, of course. And so that's one of the niches that we provide, and we pay our investors based on what we're able to generate in interest income. So to give you an idea, we're paying roughly, 200% more than what you could earn in a treasury or a bond investment, right? So 2x what you're making in your CD. That's on the private credit side, right? Very predictable what we do, very low risk. We pay our investors every month. On the equity side, there's opportunities to be real estate owners. Right? On the private credit side, what's nice is you don't have to deal with toilets and tenants and termites, kind of the 3 T's, if you will. On the equity side, you do have to deal with that if you're doing it yourself. If you invest in a syndication, then typically the sponsor is dealing with all that stuff. There's greater risk on the equity side, right? Because values can go down. Well, like a stock, you don't have to realize that decline in value until you sell. So if you're patient, I'm a firm believer that Phoenix's economic future is very, very bright. There may be some short-term declines. I can't predict the future, but long-term, I do think that our future is very, very bright. So, on that equity side, you do have a little bit more risk, but then you also have more potential upside, more gain. And so, we like to blend the two in our offerings to our investors.
That sounds great. I mean, that sounds like something that I feel like if you were wanting to get into that, I mean, it's something that would very much be beneficial to hear you out, sit down and have a deeper conversation with.
Absolutely. We love, actually, we say to folks that are considering either investing with us or borrowing from us, hey, come to the office, jump in one of our cars and let's go for a drive. And you can just see where your money is. Like when I invest in a company in Wall Street, like it kind of goes into a black box. Like, I don't know where that money is, what they're doing with it, what the accountability and oversight and reporting is. But if you and I were to go on a drive, I could say, hey, some of your money is in this house that these folks are renovating or building. Some of your money is in this house. Some of your money is in this house, right? And on the borrower side, the same thing. If you say, hey, I want to get into real estate investing, we want to be your advocate. We want to be a resource for you, because if you do this for 10 or 15 years, that's a much larger amount of money that both my company can make and you can make.
Yeah.
And we have a philosophy, and that's, it's maybe a little silly, a little esoteric, but it's the triple win philosophy, right? Like where we think all of our clients, all of our investors can win, we can win, and all of our borrowers can win, right? Like this doesn't have to be a zero-sum game. We can all benefit from this relationship. And I think that there's a lot of other folks out there that, and you can look at some of their offering documents, you can look at the way that they run their business. They take the cream right off the top. Yeah. And then they say, let's split what's left. Yeah. I've put 3, so I want to rewind just a little bit. I'm prior military. Yeah. Right? My experience in the military was, if you can get alignment right, almost everything else falls right into place. For sure. Right? Alignment, motivation, accountability, you name it, because now everyone on your left and your right wants to go where you're going. And so if you get a little out of line, they'll help nudge you back into place, and you can do the same for them, right? Absolutely. So alignment from a risk standpoint, what does that look like for my investors? I've put $3.5 million of my own money into our fund, and all of my money is subordinate to all of my investors. Okay. So if we ever take a loss, I lose my entire investment first. Yes. Right? There's not a lot of other fund managers that are willing to do that. So the proverbial put your money where your mouth is. Like, literally. I really am doing that, literally. And my team has bought in. They've put another $1.5 million in. So we've got this $5 million, what we call our first loss commitment. We will take the first loss in the fund. And you talk about alignment. On the risk side, when I say to my investors, I don't want you to lose a penny. They can believe it 100%, because that means I've lost millions of dollars. Right? So to me, in life and in so much what you do in relationships and with parenting kids, it's all about alignment. And that's one of our single kind of core focuses, is to just be totally aligned with the people we're in relationship with. I love that. I love, again, everything that you brought to the table is, again, some things that I want to bring to our audiences, because I think it is always important to A, hear the story from the horse's mouth, and B, to kind of feel a little level of ease when it comes to doing certain things, especially finance is definitely one of those things I've always felt like I don't have quite the big in mind for it, but I always feel like if I'm the smartest person in the room, I'm in the wrong room. And I like to be, I love asking questions. Yep. This makes me feel a little bit more comfortable when it comes to this investment world, where if I do have a question, I feel like I can come to you, Thomas, all the time. And I appreciate that. The old saying, there is no dumb question. There is a dumb question, and it's the one that wasn't asked. Exactly. We have to put feeling stupid aside and be willing to raise our hand and say, hey, I didn't understand that. Can you explain that again? Because if you don't, then how are you supposed to gain knowledge? And like you said, I mean, it's my goal to actually be the least educated, the least informed, the least experienced person in the room, because my growth curve, my learning curve will be the steepest. Yeah. If you're in a room full of peers, you can't learn a lot from your peers. I want to be in a room full of people that have done what I want to do in life, so I can learn from them. It's a fantastic philosophy. Thank you very much. And there's one other piece that I wanted to bring to the table today, and it's just something that I read in your website. Can you give us a little explanation on Eco Mesa and Eco Phoenix? Yeah, absolutely. So, part of my passion in life, as I said, I was prior military. I deployed multiple times. I did go to the Middle East, and there's a lot of conflict. There's a lot of suffering, and I participated in a lot of human suffering. Yeah. And that's something that, I do think about, right? And I think on a karmic level, I did a lot of things that I would say I participated again in a lot of suffering. And so a lot of that suffering in the world, I think, is around resources. Yeah. Right? That's fundamentally what it's about. And so my desire, buildings, the built environment, buildings consume 40% of our energy worldwide. Yes. The single largest consumption of energy is the built environment, right? And so I want to be a part of the cadre of folks that are changing the conversation, right? And so one of my projects that just finished last year, Eco Mesa, we won Sustainability Project of the Year for Arizona. Thank you from NAOP. It was a fantastic project. We had a great design team, a great build team. CCBG and their consultants were the design team. Wilming was our construction team. And we had a financial backer who I can't speak highly enough about. They were just absolutely fantastic to work with. But that's awesome. This building, it's it's really how I think buildings should be built more in the future, right? So we've got solar panels on the roof. I mean, it's outrageous to me that every building in Phoenix doesn't have solar panels.
You're preaching to the choir. Like, honestly, I do landscape architecture as my main job, my main 9 to 5, and that's one of the things that I've continuously I've talked to her. It's like we're wanting to reconstruct the home and build out. But I'm like, one of the first things that I was like, we're investing in solar. That's how I want to do this. Is this doesn't even break ground unless we have solar as a part of our.
Well, then you're not beholden to the energy companies, right?
Exactly.
You can kind of decouple from their constant price increases. And so, some of the other things that are and will be very important going into the future is, hey, rainwater catchment, gray water system. We take a shower and then we just flush that resource down the proverbial tube, right? It's gone.
We're big. We've talked about gray
water system, absolutely. And you're a landscape architect, and so it's crazy to me that we grow grass, cut it, and then throw it in the landfill. Yeah. Like, we should have edible landscaping.
Yeah, exactly.
We should have food. We should be growing food. It's going to be the most nutritious. There's a direct correlation between the distance that the food has traveled and its nutritional value, right? So if it's right outside your front door, that's going to be the most nutritious food. We have an electric charging station in the building.
Oh, awesome.
And we really tried to lean forward into what I like to do is, demographics is a silly way to bucket people, right?
Yeah.
It's an arbitrary, totally silly way to bucket people. And let's just say we're the same age. They'll go, oh, well, you're the same person. You're the same age, you're men, and you're basically the same, right? So all of your values must overlap.
Yeah.
Like, that's nonsense, right? I think a better way to bucket people is by value graphics, right? And there's a fantastic book out about this, but when you bucket people by their values, you might have a 20-year-old and a 60-year-old, but they might be 98% aligned on their values. And that's what we've been able to provide people in these projects, right? Because they say, I want to live in a healthier building. I want to live in a building that is a good steward of our natural resources. I want to live in a building that has electric car charging. I want to live in a building that has solar resources, et cetera, et cetera. And suddenly what happens is that Venn diagram, those circles that kind of overlap, it gets really, really tight. And your neighbor is someone that is a great friend now because you have so many of the shared values. And so because of that, we're getting some of the highest rents in Mesa, right? Because people are saying they're voting with their money and they're saying, I want to live here. This place aligns with my values. We're also able to demonstrate to the municipality, hey, look at what's possible. We did it. It's not conceptual. It's not academic. We did it. And then the third part of that is, we're able to show other developers, hey, here's the blueprint.
Here's a way to go about it.
Exactly. We all breathe the same air, man. This isn't kind of like I'll guard mine and you guard yours. Like, use my plans, use them, go. Let's all have better buildings so that the air is cleaner, the water's cleaner, and we've got a brighter future.
Yeah, I think one of the things that, again, we're talking about this off air was like the investment in our future is our children. And so one of the things that I nailed it was, I'm very particular about this sort of thing is I want to leave him with the place, opportunity to, one, grow, but an opportunity to learn from the built environment and the natural environment as well. And so, giving him an opportunity where it's like, if we built this home our forever home in a natural way of him living and growing together with it, I think that he'll be able to at least understand a little bit more about, caretaking the landscape and caretaking, precious resources and really putting it forward. Like, I like to think of it as like the saying of like planting a tree and knowing that you will not be a part of the shade that it provides.
I love it. So my wife's a big educator. She's got her master's from one of those fancy Ivy League schools back east. And, I actually never got a college degree. So it's okay. Good for her. It's totally okay. And even more accepted in today's, I think, society. Yeah. But there's a saying, and it's been attributed to Confucius. I think he's the one that said it. And it's, if you're planning for a year, plant rice.
Yeah.
If you're planning for a decade, plant trees. And if you're planning for a century, educate kids, right?
I love that.
And to me, it's just so critical, getting back to the built environment. I think the built environment can be an amazing resource to actually increase biodiversity. We bought this acre of land that was formerly a parking lot, and now it's covered in greenery, right? And so there's birds and butterflies and pollinators and all these other amazing things that was just, again, asphalt. So, the health of the occupant, right? You're talking about landscape architecture. There's a direct, again, correlation between the time spent outside in gardening and in the natural environment with healthy lifespan increases, lowering your blood pressure, right? Lowering your cholesterol. So, bringing some of that natural element inside, having larger windows, having more daylight, having plants inside that are purifying the air. There's so many little things that we can do. And you were sharing a little bit of your ancestry and of your storytelling. If you look around the world, there has been so much indigenous knowledge that kind of was lost, and what happened is we come to Phoenix or we come to Arizona and we think we've got all this ingenuity, and I like to think it's kind of like this brute force mentality, well, it doesn't matter which way the building faces because we've got air conditioning. I'm like, well, just orient the building a little bit like this, put more of the windows on the north side, fewer windows on the south side. Let's take advantage of the natural resources that we have. We have sunshine here, right? We also have a lot of heat. So let's design with that in mind. Let's not think we can brute force our way through this. And the indigenous cultures around the world were brilliant at doing this and bringing this really just kind of universal knowledge about how to interact with, if you will, Mother Nature, in a much more harmonious way. And so I think that the Western world has kind of lost a lot of that touch, and it's coming back with biophilic design. And I'm sure that in your area of expertise, you're seeing a lot more of that, people wanting to integrate the natural environment into their homes. So
I think you hit it right on the head. I mean, and it takes someone of your stature, especially as an investor, and as someone as a financial investor too, and to really understand those types of moments and understand the pivotal importance behind them, and really and like you said, put your money where your mouth is, and do the types of things that will allow this to continue forward and educate others on how it can be done a proper way. And then you can invest in it, and you don't have to worry about those types of things of like risk when it comes to this, because
we've done it.
We've done it.
The conversation is no longer about can you do it, right? It's about how much better can we do it, right? So to me, let's just say I build a couple thousand units over the next couple of decades of my life, right? Well, that's a relatively small impact within the number of homes and apartment buildings in Phoenix. But if I can change the conversation, that's when that impact multiplier really kind of goes in. And we have a core philosophy, a core belief, and that's you can do well by doing good.
Exactly.
Capitalism and it doesn't have to be this resource extraction philosophy. I believe that capitalism can be used to do well in the world. You can do good and do well by doing good.
They're not binary.
Exactly. It is non-binary. Absolutely. It's additive, actually, accretive. Yeah.
Awesome. So again, we're reaching towards the kind of part of our conversation where we look towards the future and look towards the goals. One of the things I want to first start off with is, we've been talking about City of Phoenix as a kind of grander idea of like where the potential is, and what excites you about this city and where it's going.
Great question. Yeah, a couple of different things. The obstacle is the way, right? Like the obstacle is the opportunity.
Yeah.
So a couple of different things. People say when I go, oh, I live in Arizona, and they go, oh, aren't you worried about water? And my response is, have you actually ever looked at the globe? I mean, have you ever looked at it?
Yeah.
You can literally take a globe and you can hold it in such a way so that basically the Pacific Ocean is all you see.
Yeah.
It is enormous. The Earth's covered in 75% roughly, by water.
Yeah.
So there's no shortage of water on our planet. There's a shortage of fresh water in the right location.
Yes.
Right? And so I think in the future, this isn't a physics problem, right? This is an engineering problem. We will figure out how to desalinate at a very cost-effective, very energy-effective and efficient manner, either in Gulf of Mexico or out on the California coast. And we will, if you look at the U.S. right now, it is a spider web of pipelines. Unfortunately, what's going through those pipelines right now is oil, petroleum products, right? I think in the very near future, we're going to figure out how to desalinate, and we're going to build pipelines to bring fresh water into areas that don't need it. Because if you do, we have the other two things that you need. We have an abundance of sunshine, and we've got lots of open space, right? And so I think there's a tremendous opportunity in the fact that when we get water here, again, engineering problem, not a physics problem. When we get water here, there's going to be tremendous benefits, right? From agriculture to potentially forestry. It will also help sequester carbon. It will increase biodiversity. It will help cool ambient temperatures, right? So that's a really amazing, exciting aspect of Phoenix. Number two is our heat. I actually just took a photo the other day. In 2024, we had 70 days of temperatures over 110. And just, I think, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, it was only like 22 days.
Wow,
right?
really?
So irrefutably, it is getting hotter, right? It is absolutely getting hotter. And so there's a lot of really interesting opportunities there, right? In some of the nanomaterials and some of the different coatings of paint and some different opportunities. Our atmosphere is made up of roughly 78, 79% nitrogen, 20% oxygen, and 1 or 2% of other gases, right? What does that mean? That means that a very specific spectrum of light energy will pass straight through our atmosphere and out into space. And people haven't thought about space as a renewable resource. And you go, well, I know the sun is in space, right? That's a renewable resource. How is space a renewable resource? It's infinitely cold.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And so if we can coat our rooftops and coat our streets and coat other surfaces in particularly hot environments that emit light in this spectrum that goes straight through our atmosphere, passes through the methane, passes through the CO2, we can use space as a renewable resource to disperse heat, right? So that's very interesting. And I think that Phoenix, we will be a test bed for getting these two great big concepts right. How do we get water, fresh potable water in the right location? And how do we cool our urban environments? And when we can figure out those two, man, look out. Phoenix is going to be a really valuable place to be and to live.
Well, one of the things, two of the things, one being the potable water, we already have like an infrastructure almost in place with the canal.
The canals, absolutely.
That we have throughout. And
that's based on the Holcomb.
That's what I was just about to say. It's based on indigenous building or indigenous people coming and building this kind of canal system. But now you take, this resource that we have and really look at it in a new environment. And you look at different cities like San Antonio that have built their industry based on this waterfront property idea of like building on this canal and looking towards it and not away from it.
Tempe Town Lake is a great example. It's really an economic hub for the city of Tempe because, water is life. Period. Full stop. Water is life.
And then you look at the other piece of engineering ingenuity that you brought up in this. I think ASU is really kind of, from my own background of like, I already started seeing and hearing them try to figure out ways to do these rooftop gardens and invest in that kind of built environment of like, how do we do the best kind of, resource of like building these rooftop gardens with, polymers and things that'll help it grow, but also doing a lay down of like something that will keep it cool during those hot parts of the months. And so, I think the engineering and the investment into that, those ideas are already being generated. So I think you're absolutely hitting the nail on the head when you're saying like, once we figure out these two kind of engineering problems, we're on a kind of run.
We're well positioned.
Yeah, well
positioned. We are very well positioned.
And it's going to be great. So that is really two vital parts of our key to the future, but also love to just kind of from the business aspect of Lukrom, goals for you guys for let's 2025 or even further down the road.
We're growing, so we're always out there putting our investors' money to work. We're out there raising money from folks that say, hey, I'm kind of sick and tired of Wall Street, or listen, I want a little bit more diversity. The stock market's been on a great run lately. 2022, it was down double digits. So it's a very volatile investment. Our investments offer much more stability. So from that standpoint, we're always looking for new investors. We are growing our team. I think that's an amazing opportunity. We're able to provide more services services to more people. And we will be getting into some different really interesting real estate opportunities. We just had, in one of my partnerships, we just had the City of Mesa signed an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding. Our project went so well.
Yeah.
They were thrilled that they said, hey, we want you to do that again on the lot right next door, right next to their city hall, right next to their natural history museum. We want you to do another one of these fantastic projects. So we're looking forward to getting that.
That was going to be my next question. Is there going to be like a Eco Buckeye or an Eco Chandler?
Yeah, so Eco Phoenix, actually, we just got our certificate of occupancy, I think, a week ago.
Awesome.
That's at 3rd Avenue in Roosevelt.
Oh, I got to check it out.
Yeah,
I would love to
right across from Pita Jungle.
Nice. We should definitely get together and do a video clip of like a walk around.
I would love it. We would love it. You know, it's great. I just flew in yesterday from a conference I was at, and flying in, you know, I'm looking downtown. I'm like, there it is. How do I know which one's mine? It's the only one with solar panels all across the roof, you know?
Yes.
So Eco Phoenix, we just got C of O. Eco Mesa 2, we're looking forward to doing that next year. And we've got a few other interesting initiatives that we're leaning into.
Okay, well, that's very great. I'm very excited for you. And I know that you're just, again, this world, and just from your social media, like being able to do some research on you, you're a fun kind of guy that loves to educate others, and you have a real sense of like, here, let me give you what I've learned and let me provide it in a digestible way.
Yeah.
So I think that's really great.
I love, the old philosophy, hand up, not a handout.
Exactly.
You know, that's, and I've been blessed with a lot of mentorship and a lot of help. And to me, that's one of the most fulfilling things is being able to impact and influence someone's life. You know, you really can change your trajectory, in particular young people.
Yes.
You know, you can change the trajectory of their life in such a meaningful way. And so for me, the other day I got the chance to do it. I have a small plane, a little twin-engine Cessna.
Oh, cool.
And I took a family up flying. And
you know how to fly too?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And so, you know, I said, hey, you know, I let the kid, he was like an 8-year-old little boy.
Yeah.
I said, hey, you get up front, right? So you get up front. And so we're flying, I take off, and I let him take the controls. I'm like, look, it's simple. Left is left, right is right, push is down, pull is up, right? That's simple. And so this little kid, you know, he's flying, and man, I mean, he is hyper-focused.
Yeah.
He is present to what he is doing. And he's looking out the window, turning and flying, and he's just geeked out. And we get down, and the mother's almost in tears. She said, I can't thank you enough.
Yeah.
I've never seen him so focused.
That's awesome.
I didn't know. She goes, my son's on the spectrum. You know, he has some issues. I've never seen him be able to pay attention for that long.
Yeah.
They get home, and for the next couple of months, this kid is watching YouTube videos on flying. He's watching, reading books now about flying.
Yeah.
They write me a thank you letter. And so my heart was filled. It was overflowing.
Yeah.
Because I've lit this kid's brain up.
Absolutely.
You know? And that to me is like so rewarding when you can give people something that they then go and they run with. That is the most exciting part about life, is sharing it.
Man, Thomas, you really look. Again, it's like, I'm so glad that we had this conversation today.
Same.
Thank you for everything that you shared. This end part is for you to promote your business, where they can find you online. Any phone numbers, emails, anything like that, or social media that you want to promote, go right ahead.
Perfect. I appreciate it. It's really simple. Lukrom, Lukrom, lukrom.com. You can find all the appropriate information there. You can check out the team and see what we do and see what we're passionate about and what our values are. And of course, social media channels and all that other stuff. But, you know, I would just say, hey, check out the business website. That's where I think the most important stuff is. So I think business is a great vehicle to effectuate change in the world.
Absolutely.
You know, truly, it's the way to be sustainable is to have a business that is profitable so that you can keep doing what your mission is.
Absolutely. Yeah. But before we go, we have our little outro. You can hear every episode of our podcast at findingarizonapodcast.com. Make it easy for you guys to connect with us online. That's Finding Arizona Podcast under everything. And last but not least, we always end conversations like this after every episode with the kisses, hugs, and belly rubs to our four-legged friends. And we will see you next time. Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you so much.
Really appreciate it.